Welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome to Kitchen Table Creativity. I am Donna Leffler, and today I have a super fun project for you to paint this adorable sandcastle. And we are in the middle of summer here in Idaho and where I live, and we have been going to the beach, we've been going to the lake, the river, and it's just kind of been on my mind, this story that I have about building sandcastles, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I'd like to just dive right in and get started because this is a little bit more intricate project. And I'm also really excited to tell you that this is the first project that I have in a series of summer projects. I'm going to do 6 total, and I'm going to use the same colors for each of these so that if you follow along with me and you paint all 6, you will have 6 images, 6 paintings that use the same color scheme. So it will be a collection, and they'll also have a summer theme. So these will be great to frame or to give as gifts. And I'm happy because I have always wanted to create a collection. And so here we go. All right, so real quick, I'm going to go over my supplies. First of all, I have the paints, and these are the Daniel Smith paints that I created this special palette, but I'm only using 5 of them for the summer. And so I have the 5 over here, and the colors that I'm using are this coral red, this nice bright yellow, this turquoise blue, this is sap green, and then this violet color. And so those 5 colors are going to carry over all the way into September. And this is my heart and home palette. So when we get into the fall, I'm going to switch it up and have a fall palette. Now, another thing that I'm really excited about is the ceramic palette. And you can see, if you can see, it's a little bit sideways, but Mind Your Heart Studio is engraved on it. And I got this palette off of Etsy, on Etsy, and it looks like it's handmade. It's so beautiful. So I'm really excited to use that too. So the paints I will link in the description of this video. Just click on more if you don't see everything, and it will open up the window where we'll have all the information that I'm going to talk about today. So left to right, it's always good to start out with a paper towel for blotting extra water or extra paint, or you can use any type of rag if you have one on hand. I always like a piece of watercolor paper that's the same type that I'm working on so I can test out my colors before I actually put them on my image. I have a spray bottle of water, and I use that to wet my paints, which I've already done. I have some round tip brushes, and I'm not 100% sure the exact brushes I'm going to use for this project. I know I'm going to use a little bit bigger one. I have these Escoda brushes from Spain, and this is a number 4. I have a number 1 and then a 0, and these are all round tip brushes. I have fine tip pens that I use to do the finishing touches, and I have a 005 micron and a 05 and then a Sharpie paint medium point pen, and I use those at the end to add in details to my work, which I absolutely love doing. I have my ceramic palette here. Now the watercolor paper, it is 100% cotton, and I just got the kind of individual sheets, and I cut this into 8 inches by 8 inches. And so the image itself that I'm using is about 5.5. And so I have that nicely centered on the paper. Now, the reason for this is because I plan to frame this collection, and I probably will end up hanging it in my home. And I want the frame to be pretty big, 12 inches by 12 inches square. And so the one that I'm getting has a mat in it with an 8x8 opening. So this will fit inside of it. And then the image will be in the very center. And the mat is just going to be white. So I ordered this frame off Amazon, and it's going to be coming today. So I will test that out and see how that looks when I get it. And then I have 3 jars of water, which you can't see here off camera. And I always like to have a lot of extra water, so I don't have to keep getting up and down and getting clean water. It's not always good to have really clean water when you're painting with watercolors or any kind of paint, because you want your brushes to be really clean when you switch between colors. Then I have, as always, I like to trace my image. So I have this already traced, but I have the printable in, again, the description. So click on more, will open up, and there's a link in there to a PDF that you can print out. You can cut it down to smaller size if you want. You can also enlarge this image and make it much bigger, or you can make it smaller. Whatever your plan is for this, you can work with your printer and do it that way. And I already have it traced. I like to trace using graphite paper because the waxless graphite is erasable. So it's just like drawing with pencil, but this just gives me a huge head start where I don't have to worry about it being centered or erasing a lot because it's crooked or wrong, or there's nothing wrong with tracing. And even if you don't have a traceable like this, like let's just say you have a photograph, you could also trace around it. Now, I don't put all of the fine details in, like these little marks that are on the sandcastle. I can easily add that later with a pen. So don't worry about adding every single tiny little detail. And the way I trace, I use a stylus, and you could even use a colored picture to trace around. I don't bother taping it down either. I usually just hold it steady and trace around, but I've been doing this for a while. So if you feel like it might move on you, you could use some artist tape, and you could tape down your image if that helps. All right, so to start out with, I'm going to start with the yellow. It's always good to start with a color that is light, the lightest color that you're working with, because that way your water doesn't get really super dirty to begin with. And you just get a nice light layer of color. So I actually want I'm going to start with the sandcastle. Well, you know what? I'm going to start with the sun. Take that back, because I want the sun to be quite bright. And so I'm going to start by just painting the sun with my bigger brush. And this is actually a little bit bigger than most of the projects that I do. I usually like to work on very, very small, and this is still pretty small, but it's not quite as small as the other projects that I've done. Now, I'm going to rinse my brush really well, because I'm going to just dip into this coral. I'm going to put a little bit of that on my palette too. And the reason for that is because I want to make this yellow. I just want to water it down, or not water it down, but warm it up with just a hint of this. So I'm making it almost like an orangey color, because I want it, and I am going to water it down quite a bit also. I want the sandcastle to have a little bit warmer tone like sand does. So it doesn't, it doesn't really matter so much if you want to go with a yellow too, a bright yellow. But somehow I feel like if you want it to really look like sand, probably better to warm it up just a tiny bit. Now you can start with a pure yellow too, and you can go over it and add some shadows or add some interest by layering over it with another warmer color, and that's called glazing. So again, I'm using my little bit bigger watercolor brush here, the round tip. Now I also have a new camera that I started using, and I think it has a built-in microphone. It's an overhead camera that's specifically made for screen sharing. And I really like it a lot better because it tends to focus, I think, on the image that I'm painting more than my phone camera, which is what I was using before. But I'm not like 100% sure on the sound. I feel like it almost sounds like I'm, I don't know, in an echoey room a little bit or something. So let me know what you think in the comments. That would be great if you could give me some feedback. It's always hard to know how other people view and see what I'm doing. So this week I'm writing about, I'm still in the process of creating my creative heart journal that I send every Friday. And the journal is a little publication that I do. It's a mini magazine flip book that I create. It's a digital flip book. It's like a little magazine, and it has creative inspiration in it. It has the PDF type tutorial, like in writing, of this painting. And a link to the YouTube videos, all of them have a link now. Just start doing that, I don't know, like 4 or 5, maybe 10 videos ago. And that's when I started my YouTube channel. So I write about the story of why I chose the sandcastle. It's just really dear to my heart. I've lived in California for many, many years, just the last 2 years in Idaho, because our daughter moved with our grandchildren, and I was just heartbroken. So I really wanted to be closer. So we bought actually a second house here in Idaho. And I spend a lot of time here because I love to be with my grandkids. All right, so as you can see, I'm taking a little bit darker, making this just a tad bit darker, warmer with that. And with that orange, and or the coral, I'm sorry, I'm going to paint the doorway here. And this little window. I'm going to make these darker too to start out with. I'm just going to give them a little color. And it's okay if you have a few like what little white areas too. If it's not solid, it actually will add interest. All right, so now I am going to add just a touch of warm to the sun also, just to kind of give it a little interest. And I'm also going to, while I have this yellow out, paint the center of these flowers. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse my brush. And I'm going to take quite a bit of this coral this time. I'll put that here. And I have those two colors mixed together now. And I actually want to try to make it a little brown. So I'm going to take some of this violet. This is really pigmented. And I'm going to add just a touch of that violet. And that will make brown. And I want brown because I want to paint the doorway, the darker brown. Now, you might want to experiment a little bit, test it out on your paper until you get a brown that you like. The more you mix paints, the more you will see like, oh yeah, that'll work, I know. But it's really good to test it ahead of time so that you're actually getting what you think you're getting on your paper. Okay, so back to the sandcastle story. I keep getting a little bit sidetracked here. Okay, so we would go to the beach, not a whole lot, actually. We lived about an hour drive from the ocean in California. So not terribly far, but I don't know, you know how it is when you live somewhere. It's just a lot of times you don't get around to doing as much as you want to in your own local area. Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of this wash and just kind of add some shadows in the areas where there might be shadows, like under the eaves. So we were at the beach. I don't remember which one it was even, but we have three children. They're adults now, but at the time, our twin boys were probably about 8, and our daughter was about 12, maybe. And we got to the beach, and there was this man who was building this unbelievable sandcastle. Like it wasn't just a sandcastle; it was like a small city. And the castle itself was just enormous. It was like I've never seen anything like it. And I've never seen anything like it since either. It was this surreal kind of thing. Like, is this real? Is this actually a sandcastle? And it was. I mean, I don't know how long it took him, or it was probably days. The thing was incredible. And so, of course, we couldn't or wouldn't even try to build something like that. But the thing that was so cool is that we were inspired by it. We were really inspired by what he had created. So we went to our little spot on the sand and we started building our own little sandcastle. And it was just so much fun because our boys, especially, you know, at like 8 years old, they were so excited about that sandcastle and they wanted to do their own. So ours was nowhere near what his looked like, but still it was pretty incredible and pretty fun. And so I started thinking about how I've always loved art. I've always loved creativity. Um, and now I try to get people together to do art together because it's healing, it's therapeutic, it's fun, it's so exciting to see how everyone's turns out. And I you know I was reliving that memory. And so just to say how when you paint images, you paint something, a lot of times that's what happens, which is so cool. All right, so I'm just kind of going with what I feel like as far as this is not supposed to look realistic. It's supposed to be kind of whimsical, very whimsical and fun. So I'm just kind of adding some little bit of trying to make it look a little bit rough like sand would look. And I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. And the last thing I'm going to do with this color, because there's a lot of this color, I'm going to paint this, the ground, the sand that the sandcastle is on. And I'm using, when I do this, I always do a very, very light wash. And I can always go back and, darken it up or add more to it. But to start, I always like to just make it very, very light. So the reason why I really start thinking about a collection is, well, actually, I've been thinking about it for quite a long time because I really like the idea of having something that like 6 different framed print paintings that I've done that I could put together on the wall. My walls are still pretty bare here. Now, what I like to do is just take plain water and just carry this kind of wash for the foundation down so that it just kind of disappears. All right. I'm going to rinse this brush really well now. And let's see, I think the next, I'm going to keep the bigger brush. No, I think I'm going to switch to the smaller one. I take that back. I'm going to switch to, this one is a number 1, so it's pretty small. I'm going to wet this brush. And I'm going to go with the green next. So I thought I signed up to do a women's conference through our church, and I actually set up a booth, a table last year, and it was really wonderful. There's 700 women that come to this conference. It's just great. It's a really, really great conference. And so I'm going to do it again this year. I just signed up. And I wanted something a little bit different this year. I wanted to display more of my work. So again, I'm watering the screen way down. I'm just going to start with like a little wash. And if it's too dark, just blot your brush. Still nice light green wash on these leaves. So I wanted something different. I wanted to be able to display my work. And so I thought I'm going to do that collection, frame them, and have them hanging on like a grid behind my table. And the conference is not until September, so I have a couple months. So I'm really excited about it because something different. And then when I'm done, I'll hang those in my home. Okay, do a little sprig of grass. Now I'm starting with very, very light wash because I like to layer the leaves and add in some darker details after I do the basics, which is just the wash. And it's actually kind of good if you have some a little bit lighter, some a little bit darker. They really shouldn't be all exactly the same because nature is never exactly the same. So here we have lakes and we have a river. We don't have the ocean, obviously, in Idaho. But truthfully, I don't really miss it. I was always kind of, I mean, the ocean is beautiful. The sound of the waves, absolutely tranquil and wonderful. But I was always a little bit like intimidated to swim in the ocean because it's just so powerful. And I did have an experience when I was young where I got caught up in a tidal wave in Mexico swimming in the ocean. I was very young and I didn't really know that could even happen. It was quite dangerous. Now I'm just adding the stems in darker green. And you just want to do a really light touch to make a thin line. And then I'm going to go back and add in some darker, kind of like on the underside of the leaf. So if you would like, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel here on YouTube if you haven't already. That way, I believe YouTube will send you when there's new stuff that I post. And I'm working diligently to post 1 video a week along with my Creative Heart Journal. And if you're not signed up for the journal, go into the description. There's a link, and I will sign you up to receive it every Friday. Comes via email to your inbox. Totally free. And I do it because, for one thing, it's just super fun. It also holds me accountable to painting myself because, especially as women, it's just so easy for us to think somehow like that's not so important. I should be doing something else, which is, I think, a lie, not true at all. All right, so I just added a few more little details here. Just holding my brush very, very loosely. And it's always good to kind of just take a step back and say, is there anything, look at it, is there anything I would like to add to or change before I switch colors? I'm getting better at doing that because when I first started watercolor painting, I found I was constantly either forgetting to rinse my brush or switching colors back and forth and having to rinse a lot more, having to change my water a lot more. All right, now I'm going to get a little bit more of this coral. Drop the water there. If you ever end up with water on your painting where you didn't want it, you can just take your paper towel and just quickly press down and blot up, and it will remove even the paint if you've got too dark or too much paint. So again, I like to start with more of a watered down version of whatever color I'm using. And I think I'll just start with the starfish. Now, I do what's called watercolor sketching. And so as we finish, if you like your painting, you don't have to do the detail work. If you like the way it turned out, you can even take a very fine tip brush and some dark color, black or dark brown, to do the detail work. But I find it's a lot easier to use a pen. So I use the micron pens to add details, and it also tends to be very forgiving so that you can maybe not cover up, but you can fix things that maybe you felt like were kind of a mistake. Here I have kind of a lot of water in here. It's good to have your paper towel in hand while you're painting. So you don't have to add the detail work, but I just find it makes my work kind of pop. And if anything turned out not exactly the way I wanted it to, a lot of times after I add the detail, the black pen, it just looks way better. So see how you feel. Last year I was at Newport Beach with my family. We go every year. We're going to go this year too. And we did watercolor painting together, and it was so fun. They had like an activity at the center where we stayed. We stayed at a timeshare, and they had activities. So we all did that together, most of us. And it was just so fun and so relaxing. And I painted a sailboat, and I was so used to doing my watercolor sketching kind of thing that I didn't have my black pen. And so the lady that was teaching the class said, "Oh my gosh, it looks fine the way it is. You don't need a black pen." And so that was nice to hear, because I think sometimes, we can be so critical of our own work. Not sometimes, quite often actually. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of coral in this picture. We have the pail here. So I'm gonna work on that next. So I'm kind of gravitating also a little bit towards painting scenes of objects instead of just one object. Pretty much this whole last year, I would just do the sandcastle. I wouldn't try to add anything. So now I'm starting to do a little bit more detail work by having more in the painting. Like this one has different elements, not just the sandcastle. And it's definitely takes longer. So I'll still be adding in after we do the collection. The collection is, I'm not going to say everything. I have it kind of mapped out, but I'm not going to commit yet to exactly what we're going to paint. They're all summary pictures. They're all summary images. Now for the heart, it's white. So just paint around it. Try not to paint on it. And then when we're all done, it's going to look pretty white, even though the watercolor paper is kind of a cream color. And if you want it to be more white, you can use like a Sharpie paint pen like I use. But most of the time, you don't have to. I don't have to. If I outline this heart in black, it's going to look quite white. Now, as long as I have this color again out, I'm going to go ahead and add some darker to the starfish. Just the edges. And this bucket, the interior is going to be a little darker. It's going to be shadow. And I'm also going to do this edge over here a little bit. Again, add interest and look like there's a little shadow. Now, sometimes when you're painting, it will look different after it dries. I've noticed sometimes I don't realize how much water was on, and it might have like sort of like a hard edge. So if that happens, I just go back with some water and kind of smooth it out. So that's why I always say like kind of take a step back, see what it looks like. And I'm also going to add some darker to this. I really want these colors to kind of pop. I want this to be fun, bright, summery. And then as we transition into fall, I'll be focusing on more fall colors. I just really love the seasons, and especially now that I'm in Idaho a lot, the seasons are a lot more distinct than, of course, they were in California. So it's been really fun. And the last thing here are these two of these little hearts. And I don't really think I'm going to have to switch to even a smaller brush. I'm using just the very tip of this one. And if anything, I mentioned this in my workshop the other night that the more I paint with watercolor, the more I'm seeing how brushes matter to me more than the paper. I mean, people will argue with me and say, no, the paper is most important, or the paint. More than the paint, more than the paper, what's most important to me is the brush, because if you can get a nice fine tip point like this, you can use the same brush over and over for so long. And it's worth it to me to spend a little bit more money on the brushes. All right, so I think that is it. That's it for the coral color. It's coming out looking great here. Rinsing my brush really well and taking this beautiful turquoise. This is actually one of my very favorite colors. I love this color. Every time I use it, I'm really glad that I bought this one. And like always, like I say, you don't have to buy the paints that I am showing. You can use whatever you have on hand. You can mix whatever you have on hand. If you don't have, say you don't have a purple, you can mix a purple. Don't feel like you have to run out and get a bunch of supplies. I think the most important thing is just to paint. And if you're not happy with something, then try some different stuff. But I don't know, buying supplies can become kind of an addiction where you feel like more might help, but I have found it does not. What really helps is practice. You want to practice as much as you can, even if it's 10 minutes a day or an hour a week or whatever you can fit into your schedule. Make time for painting. It's so good for you, so therapeutic. I have had high a lot of things, blood sugar, cholesterol. I've had a lot of not so great lab work, but one of the things my doctor was always concerned about was my cortisol levels because they were really high. I'm going to go on to these flags now. That blue, and I need a little bit more paint. And the flags, I want them to be kind of just a solid darker, so I'm going to not water it down as much for the flags. So yeah, so since I started watercolor painting and I moved to Idaho, my cortisol levels have gone way down to normal, and which is astounding because they've been high for so long that I just thought it was kind of a hopeless case. So never give up. So once a month, I am doing a free paint along workshop on Zoom. I have done a few of these, and you can come on with me and paint. Right now I'm focusing on the same project, which is a cute bird, a whimsical bird with flowers. So again, there's a link in the description for that if you would like to sign up. The next one is coming up in August. And if you're watching this tutorial some other time, it'll probably be a different date. But I would love to meet you. I'd love to paint with you. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up. So those are my free things I do. I do the Creative Heart Journal once a week. I work on that every week. And then I do the free workshop. So I'm also working on a paid version of the Paint Along, and it's called Wishes from the Heart. And it's a low-cost subscription. And I'm kind of just getting that going. And so looking for what we call founding members. And those are people who are willing to pay less, but just be supportive because maybe all the details are not completely worked out yet. It's brand new. Okay, so that is the blue, and we really just have the purple left now. It's beautiful purple. Like I said, my purple here is very, very pigmented. And I don't know if you've done much studying of the different kinds of paints, but the Daniel Smith paints are considered professional paints, and they are quite pigmented. So professional paints, well, that's one of the big differences in student grade or lesser grade paints, is that they're a lot more pigmented. So little goes a long way. But the Daniel Smith paints, there's all different types, and some of them are what we call granulated. So you could look it up and do some research. I don't really have a lot of information put together on this yet. Maybe someday I will do a tutorial on it. But they formulate these paints in different ways so that they work differently on the paper. So some of them have like granulation, and so it like will give texture just by using that particular paint, that particular color. So I have a few of those in my collection, but I don't have one for summer. I think for sure in the fall I'll be using a granulation, some formula granulation, so that you can see. I think a lot of times those type of paints are used for background, like landscape type. So the more I paint, the more I learn. Really fun. Okay, and then the last thing, don't want to forget, this little handle on the bucket is purple. This is really pretty fine detail work. And, you know, the more you practice, the steadier your hand will get. And if you're finding that your hand is shaking a little bit or you can't seem to get a straight line, just try resting your hand on the, and move your fingers, don't move your wrist. If you move your wrist, it's much harder to get straight lines. Okay, so I'm taking a step back now. I'm looking at my image, and I actually think I'm going to rinse this brush really well. And I'm going to go back to my yellow. My yellow is actually starting to get a little bit used up because I've been using it a lot. But what I want to do is get a lot of pigment here. I'm going to blot my brush in this paper towel so it's not any water on the edge. And I want to just give these rays on the sun some yellow. All right, and then while you have your yellow out, if you want, you could add just a touch of yellow to the leaves. Now, a lot of times when you have green already on them, the yellow is not going to show up very much. Which is kind of what's happening with mine, but that's okay. I like the way it turned out anyway. All right, so now I'm taking a little step back, kind of looking around. Is there anything that I missed? Is there anything I want to add? Does it look balanced? You know, sometimes you might want to add like a little sprig of grass or something to a different part. And I think this looks good. So if you're happy with the way that yours turned out, and you could just leave it the way it is right now, and that would be fine. But I really like to go in with my Micron pen. And to do that, I'm going to move some of these paints out of the way. And I'm going to get rid of my palette, make some room. And I'm going to start with my 0.5 micron. Now, it's good to make sure that it's important to make sure that your work is dry before you start working with your pen, because even though it's permanent ink, it can smear pretty easily if your paint is wet. And I'm looking at an angle and seeing that some of my leaves are still a little bit wet because I just added that yellow, so I won't work on those first. So what I'm going to do is just start with the sandcastle itself, because I know that's very dry. And to do this kind of outlining, you just use a very light touch. And it's almost like you were drawing it, like you were sketching it. That's why it's called watercolor sketching. And the style that I paint in, I've named it Scandinavian folk art. And I realize like a lot of what I am attracted to is just whimsical and fun, makes me happy. And I admire people who can paint in a very realistic style. And sometimes I practice that. But most of the time I'm just perfectly happy and content with these fun little whimsical drawings. They make me happy. And I think that's the most important thing. I think if I was trying to be a realist and have my work look very realistic, like a photograph, it kind of stresses me out because I feel like, oh, it's not working, or it doesn't look like what I hoped for, and it's not good enough, and that's not good. It's not good to have that kind of attitude at all. So that's why I found something that I really like, and I'm developing my own style. And so maybe you like that style too, and that's why you're here, which would be wonderful. And the other thing about this style is it's very easy for beginners to paint. And that was my thing. Like, I have taught for many years all kinds of different things. And mainly I used to teach scrapbooking, but I've taught graphic design. I've taught all kinds of computer stuff. I have a medical technology background. That's what I went to college for. And so I was not really intimidated so much by computers growing up because we didn't have them when I was young. So I taught older people for a long time how to grow online businesses, doing marketing and all the website building and that kind of stuff. And I still do have that somewhat. I teach still. Also homeschooled our 3 kids, and that was quite a journey. So I taught scrapbooking for many years. I had a studio in my house. Women would come over and we would scrapbook, and that was so fun. All young moms, so that was a really good time of my life, something I loved to do. And I was very grateful to have a husband who was supportive of that. Took care of the kids a lot of times when I was teaching. So I'm keeping my image straight, like straight up. And it's definitely harder to do this kind of sketching, detail outlining when I'm not rotating my picture, but I like to do it this way when I'm on a camera because I think it's just a little bit easier for people to see. But if I was doing this off camera, I would be probably rotating. So feel free to rotate your image if it feels easier. So I'm kind of just doing the general outlining of everything right now. And sometimes I don't outline everything. It just depends on the picture. Sometimes I don't outline leaves. Sometimes I don't go over stems. So kind of use your intuition. And yours does not have to look exactly like mine. In fact, it would be great if it looked different. Like maybe you want to use different colors. Maybe you don't have a turquoise blue. Maybe you have a navy blue, or maybe you don't like that color, which is fine. Just use what speaks to your heart and whatever makes you happy. Focus on that. And the micron pen I'm using is pretty fine tip. I like to have a very fine line, sometimes even less than this one, and have it be kind of light, not a heavy, heavy line. And then you can see how that heart looks quite white against the color and outlined in black. And I think it's better if you don't have the lines too heavy and dark, because with watercolor it is, even with these bold colors, um it's pretty like transparent. So you don't want to like add really heavy bold lines to it unless that's a look that you're trying to get for some reason, which is fine too. Okay, so now I think I might add just a little bit of detail to these leaves and the flower. Definitely the starfish. And like this line is a little crooked, totally fine. In fact, for something like this, you want it to be a little bit crooked here and there because it really adds to the whimsy. All right, now, there's little in the image that I have here, there's little dots on the sandcastle. And that's something that you don't necessarily have to do, but I think I would like to add a few little dots, especially to the sand. And so I'm going to start by just making little tiny circles very lightly with the sand, just to kind of give it some interest, and they're just going to be kind of random. And then I'm just going to add some dots, maybe just like a hint of a dash. Now you could do this with dark paint of some sort if you don't have markers. But if you're going to follow any of my tutorials, I almost always use the markers. I just really like the way it turns out. Okay, so now again, I would just kind of take a little step back, see if there's anything I want to add, anything that I think looks like it needs something more. And I'm going to take my white Sharpie pen. I'm just going to put a little bit of white on the sun, just to kind of give it just a little tiny bit of like the sun is a little bit brighter there. And I really don't think there's a whole lot else, maybe a little bit on the starfish, just to kind of break up the color a little bit more. I'm going to leave the heart on the bucket alone. And maybe I'll just add a slight bit to this. Again, sometimes it just breaks up a solid color. I'm just very lightly adding ever so slight bit of white. And again, this isn't something that you absolutely have to do unless you want to. Okay, I am happy with the way this looks now. And the last step, as always, I like to sign my work, and I highly recommend you sign your work, even if you feel like it didn't turn out that great or you're not planning on doing anything with it. You definitely want to sign it, just to, if anything, to keep track of your progress, to see how you've progressed from this to this over the months and years. And so I like to just very lightly, with a very 005, a very fine tip pen, I do my initials, and I put the year, just the year, so I can keep track of it. Okay, this is done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I can't wait to get the frame and see how that looks. So please, if you're wanting to follow my tutorials, subscribe to my channel, my YouTube channel, sign up for my Creative Heart Journal. Leave me a comment. Let me know who you are, what you're painting. I also have a women's Facebook group, and you're more than welcome to join that. I'd love for you to post your work in there. I'd love to see how you're doing with things. And so thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye now.